Georgia and Moldova. Let's take a listen.
Today, the College has adopted its opinions, the 3 opinions, on the membership applications of Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. We have adopted these opinions after very carefully assessing the merits of each of these applications, the merits on the basis, as you know, of the Copenhagen criteria and the Madrid criteria. You might also know that these are concerning the political criteria, the economic criteria, and the question whether the country, the applicant, has the capacity to thrive in our very competitive internal market. Let me start with Ukraine. The Commission recommends to the Council, first, that Ukraine is given European perspective, and second, that Ukraine is given candidate status. This is, of course, on the understanding that the country will carry out a number of further important reforms. Let me detail out a bit our recommendation. In the view of the Commission, Ukraine has clearly demonstrated the country's aspiration and the country's determination to live up to European values and standards. Ukraine, before the war, had already embarked on its way towards the European Union. For 8 years now, it had already been gradually moving closer to our union. As you know, we have the association agreement since 2016, and with that, Ukraine has already implemented roughly 70% of the EU acquis, that is, the rules, the standards, and the norms. Ukraine is taking part in important EU programs, like, for example, the Horizon program or the Erasmus program. Ukraine has a very robust parliamentary presidential democracy. It has a very well-functioning administration, public administration, that has kept and is keeping the country running during this war. We know that because we work very closely with the Ukrainian administration. We know that the decentralization reform that the country has adopted is a success, because we see the performance of the regions and of the municipalities even under the stress test of this war now. And the administration's modernization reform is ongoing. Ukraine has a very vibrant and active civil society. This is good. Ukraine has an electoral system that has proven to be fair and free, as considered by ODIHR. Ukraine has an education system that is well developed. We know and admire the digital skills of this country and the digital infrastructure that is in place. And if we look at the economy, of course, we have to look at the economy before the war. And there, Ukraine has shown a sound level of deficit of only 2% and a public debt below 50%. This is good too. So Ukraine has already taken important steps on the path to becoming a fully functioning market economy. This is important because, of course, Ukraine has to be capable of integrating into the EU single market. You know that we are working on integrating Ukraine deeper into the single market, for example, in the transport sector, where we have the transport agreement, or we integrate the energy systems further. You might recall that even after the beginning of the war, the Ukraine electric grid has been coupled to the European Union's ones. All these steps are in a very good direction. At the same time, we of course know that further work has to be done. On the rule of law, for example, Ukraine has come far. It has come far in setting up the necessary institutions for the judiciary to function effectively, and the necessary institutions on the vetting of prosecutors. The focus should now be on speeding up the selection of judges of the Constitutional Court, as well as the members of the High Council of Justice. On anti-corruption, Ukraine also has come far in setting up the necessary anti-corruption bodies. So the focus should now be on the appointment of the new head of the anti-corruption prosecutors, and the new director of the Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau. In other words, the anti-corruption bodies are in place. Now they have to become fully operational. On oligarchs, Ukraine has adopted a bold law against oligarchs, the de-oligarchization law. And in fact, it is the only country of the Eastern Partnership that has done so. This is good. Now here, too, it is on implementation. We want to see results on the ground. On fundamental rights, Ukraine has achieved to comply with 80% of the recommendation of the Venice Commission. What remains to be done is the adoption of the law on national minorities. So in sum, a lot has been achieved, but of course important work remains. I have discussed all this with President Zelensky and Prime Minister Shmyhal when I was in Kiev around about 10 days ago, and I got a very telling reply by President Zelensky. He said, you know, even if we would not apply for European membership, these are all reforms that are necessary and that are good for the country, and we would have to do them anyway because it's for Ukrainian democracy. Of course, we know that not everything can be achieved as long as a war rages in the country, but many of these issues can nevertheless already be addressed. So, to conclude on Ukraine, we have one clear message, and that is, yes, Ukraine deserves European perspective. Yes, Ukraine should be welcomed as a candidate country. This is on the understanding that good work has been done, but important work also remains to be done. The entire process is merits-based. So it goes by the book, and therefore progress depends entirely on Ukraine. It is Ukraine that has it in their hands, and what could be better to shape your own future. Turning to Moldova, our assessment goes broadly into the same direction as for Ukraine. We therefore also recommend that Council grants Moldova the European perspective and candidate status, on the understanding that the country will carry out a number of further important reforms. In the recent past, Moldova has taken a decisive step towards reforms with a clear mandate from its citizens. It is on a real pro-reform, anti-corruption and European path for the first time since independence. Of course, Moldova still has a long way to go. Its economy and public administration in particular require major improvements, but provided that the country's leaders stay on course, we believe that the country has the potential to live up to the requirements. On Georgia, Georgia shares the same aspirations and potential as Ukraine and Moldova. Its application has strength, in particular, the market orientation of its economy with a strong private sector. To succeed, the country must now come together politically to design a clear path towards structural reform and the European Union, a path that concretely sets out the necessary reforms, brings on board civil society, and benefits from broad political support. This is why we recommend to Council to grant the European perspective and to come back and assess how Georgia meets the number of conditions before granting its candidate status. So finally, to conclude, on these three opinions, we did a thorough assessment, and this is laid out in the now public three opinions. This is a very solid basis of facts and evidence to move forward. And building on this basis of evidence is, of course, a historic and a political momentum. And we all know that Ukrainians are ready to die for the European perspective. We want them to live with us the European dream. Thank you so much. for the moment.
Thank you very much. Mrs. President, Commissioner, you now have the floor.
Thank you. Just to complement what the President has just explained to you, as you have seen in the midst of these very turbulent times, 3 of our partner countries have decided to send a very clear message to us and to the world. Ukraine, Moldova and Georgia want to join the European Union. They have expressed very clearly and loudly their own will, which is that they consider the European Union and membership in the European Union to be the most important and most reliable tool for their own peace, stability and prosperity long term. Now it is for Europe to show that this is a reality. So it is obvious that in this new geopolitical context, Europe has also reassessed the importance of its own unity and the importance of the enlargement policy. We have treated these applications very seriously, but not as business as usual. We have been working very hard, and we have done our utmost to deliver as fast as we can and respond to the Council, which has asked the Commission very quickly after the applications were received to come up with an opinion, because this is the first step of any process, that the Commission prepares an opinion on the applicant countries. We have made a rigorous and robust assessment. You will see in the documents that we have been applying the exact same methodology as we have been doing in previous cases, and we are relying on the criteria that are well established, the so-called Copenhagen criteria, supplemented in Madrid 1995, which are, first of all, a political criteria, meaning how the country ensures democracy, the rule of law, protection of human rights and minorities. The second criteria is the economic criteria, to assess whether there is a functioning market economy capable of resisting competitive pressures within the European Union. And third, the so-called acquis criteria, meaning the capability of applying our legislation, the EU law, as is on the ground. On the political criteria, I think the President has already explained everything to you, so I don't want to repeat that. And I think my task here would be to explain to you a bit this construction that we put forward, meaning European perspective, candidate status with conditions, and conditions to obtain candidate status. For Moldova, I think it is very clear what needs to be done. We need the public administration reform to go ahead and to be finished, and we need a public financial management system and a reinforcement of the public procurement system. These are fundamental elements of any well-functioning public administration. We need Moldova also to deliver on the judiciary, meaning to ensure the independence, integrity, efficiency and accountability and transparency of the judiciary through the establishment of asset verification and effective democratic oversight. Of course, we have appointments to be made in the Supreme Council of Magistracy and so on. The third big area of delivery would be the fight against corruption, because we need proactive and efficient investigations. We need a credible track record to be established. The fourth is organised crime, where we need increased cooperation with the regional, with us, the European Union, and with our international partners to see to it that we have asset recovery, especially after the bank fraud that we have seen in the country, and we need delivery on the priorities set out by the Financial Action Task Force, also known as FATF. And finally, on fundamental rights, we need better involvement of the civil society, protection of human rights, particularly when it comes to the vulnerable groups, and the fight against violence against women. For Georgia, we are setting out also a comprehensive list of priorities on the basis of which we should be able to deliver a proposal for candidate status. On democracy, we would like to see the end of a political polarization that has characterized the country, and we need the cooperation of all political parties in the country and the delivery of the agreement that was reached with the facilitation of the European Union. This also relates to the judicial reform, because that agreement also covered that, and we need also progress on the fight against corruption, where the independence of the anti-corruption agency would have to be ensured. Fourth, we need to step up the fight against organised crime. We need rigorous investigations, prosecutions, and a credible track record again here. And finally, on fundamental rights, we need to guarantee the freedom and professional and pluralistic and independent media environment for the journalists in the country. So in conclusion, I think today is the day when we are making a proposal, and we do hope that next week the Council will follow fully our proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now go to your questions, and I give the floor to Ketevan.
So we've just been hearing there from Oliver Varhelyi and Ursula von der Leyen, who've been giving the recommendation on the candidate status of Ukraine and Moldova and Georgia. Now we're going to hear from some questions from journalists. Let's take a listen.
I represent the country, and you know that a majority of Georgian people wants to be with you in this organization and to be part of European family. And we hope that this day will come sooner than later. Can you tell us about time frame? We just heard these conditions for Georgia. Is there any time frame for fulfillment these conditions? And also, what is your main message, Madam President, for Georgian people? They are now very, very carefully listening to you, what you will tell them about our European future.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. So, first of all, it is a huge step forward for Georgia to get the European perspective. This is a big achievement. And the door is wide open. It is up to Georgia now to take the necessary steps to move forward, to come together, the whole country on the political side, and to show very clearly that you want to get active. And this also determines, of course, the time frame. It's up to you. The sooner you deliver, the sooner there's progress. And therefore, it is in the hands of Georgia to really speed up and be clear and move forward through the open door.
Thank you very much. Yes, please.
Dmitry Shkurko, National News Agency of Ukraine. Madam President, as there are a lot of speculations around that decision, could you specify, is that decision related to the fact that Ukraine now is in a war, or it is just because it's have its own merits to obtain that candidate status? And the second question, if I may, you have a positive decision both for Ukraine and Moldova. Does it mean that the two countries will be considered in the same basket like it was for a while with Albania and North Macedonia? Thank you.
I think my answer for your first question answers immediately also the second question. This whole process, that's very important, is merits-based. It's done by the books. There have to be, and if you look into the communication, they are have detailed out what needs to be done. And therefore, Ukraine has achieved a lot. If you look at the progress in the last 8 years, the reforms that have been done, the improvements that have been done, the work that has been done together with us, shows that there has been really progress. So merits-based, Ukraine is now recommended not only to have the European perspective, but also the candidate status. And of course, we all know more work needs to be done. But there too, it's detailed out. It's very clear. You know exactly what is necessary. And as I said, I think the country itself wants to do these reforms because it benefits from these reforms. So completely merits-based, and each of the 3 applicants decides themselves whether they want to move forward and how fast they want to move forward.
Thank you. Thomas.
Thanks a lot. Thomas Kutschka, Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. First, 2 questions to the President. Just to clarify, when you say further improvements, reforms need to be made, I understand you to mean that they need to be made before accession negotiations can be opened up. Could you please clarify that? Or does it mean need to be made to obtain a full candidate status? And then the second question, there has been a report from the European Court of Auditors last fall that had a devastating analysis of what they called grand corruption in Ukraine. And in fact, they were talking not about progress, but about the country moving backwards. That referred mainly to the time frame between 2016 and 2019. So in your assessment, has Ukraine overcome all these shortfalls that had been analyzed in the report? And is the Commission able to measure that? Because that's the other point the court made, that the Commission wasn't even able to measure progress. And one question, if I may? Yes, very quickly, to the Commissioner. There have been many rumors that the questionnaires in Ukraine have in fact more or less been filled out by EU officials and not by the government itself. Could you please clarify that? Thanks.
So, the recommendation is clear. The recommendation is European perspective and candidate status. And we understand that the countries will do further reforms before they can move on. And move on depends on how they perform. There's a very clear process in our methodology, and the overall methodology has been reformed, I think, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And there we got this dynamic into the methodology for all the countries that are applicants for European membership. That is, if you can move on faster with clusters that are summarized, but you can also fall back, so there is a reversibility in the overall process, if you do not perform but backslide. And this goes for all the countries that are applying for EU membership. I think this is something very important and beautiful in the process itself, because it shows that it's the country itself that has it in its hand whether they progress rapidly or whether there's a stagnation or whether there's a backsliding. On the topic of corruption, it is a topic, it is an issue. We've always been working on it. And indeed, the people of Ukraine elected their government just because they wanted the fight against corruption. We have, of course, seen that over time, and mainly in the last years, there was progress in fighting corruption. If you look, for example, at Transparency International over the next 6 years, yes, Ukraine is starting from a low level. But what is important is the trajectory. And the trajectory is positive, so they are gaining ground on fighting corruption. That is important. You see also that, indeed, there was a dip in 2019, but then they progressed again. And you have other countries that in this table are backsliding and are losing ground on corruption. One more point on corruption. What is so important? It's the digitalization of processes. Because the less you have person-to-person contacts, and the more you have digitized, the better you can fight corruption. And we've discussed that intensively. When I was in Kiev with President Zelensky and Prime Minister Shmyhal has very interesting, far-reaching plans what the digitalization of the country and the processes are concerned. So there's awareness of the issue, and there should be and is awareness of the issue, but there's also intensive work that is being done. And this is just a criterion where you have to improve.
Kush.
Yes, on the questionnaires, all the questionnaires have been filled out by the countries because they know best. Of course, we have been using data that we have at hand, and in that sense, this was a new approach applied by the Commission, so that we are not asking replies to questions we already know the replies to. The second element is, yes, of course, we have provided technical support for all three countries to be able to fill it out quickly and in a non-ambiguous way, so that we spare time having no need for additional questions to be put. So it was a common effort. We have helped these countries, but they have been the ones filling it out.
Thank you very much. I will take a few questions from the Interactio platform now. And first we go to Tanya Milewska.
Thank you. Hi, Tanya Milewska from the Macedonia News Agency. I have a question on North Macedonia, obviously. First of all, I would like to know if the European Commission will make sure that the proposed negotiating framework will not be in violation of the EU acquis and the EU values, because it seems that some of the Bulgarian demands are contrary to the EU values. And to go back to Ukraine, when do you expect Ukraine and Moldova to start negotiations? And finally, why didn't you use this occasion to propose a candidate status for Bosnia?
Thank you very much. Commissioner.
Thank you. First of all, I'm not aware of any negotiating framework. All I'm aware of is a complete deadlock in Sofia, which I'm not particularly happy about, since I've been spending every second Tuesday in the country to no avail. It seems that internal politics are capable of majoring the credibility of the European Union. So at this stage, I don't think we can talk about any negotiating framework. Second, when it comes to candidate status to Bosnia and Herzegovina, Bosnia and Herzegovina is running its own accession process. It's a merit-based process, as also the President underlined, and it applies to each and every single candidate country. Bosnia and Herzegovina has to fulfill 14 priorities that have been laid out in our opinion, and which was confirmed by the European Council at that time. We're still waiting the country to deliver on that. If we are to renegotiate conditions that have been clearly put forward, then we would be giving discounts on the enlargement process, and this is not something that we are doing.
Thank you. I take another question from the platform. Philippe Régnier.
Oui, bonjour, merci beaucoup. Une question en français, si je peux. Je voudrais vous poser
Hello, a question in French, if I may. President, you asked a question about general policy, the technical work. Does that also send out a message to Vladimir Putin? And then a confirmation, just to be sure that I've entirely understood, when it comes to Ukraine and Moldova, you are indeed suggesting that the candidate status be given immediately, and that then the necessary reforms should start in order to start negotiations. Or, on the other hand, should the reforms be started before official candidate status can be granted? It's not entirely clear to me. Thank you.
So the former is, and I will repeat it for you, is the case. So we propose candidate status, and we know that then we have to work on reforms that are laid out as I said, on the understanding that these reforms will be done. Again, the whole accession process is a dynamic process that can move forward, stall, or backwards in at different speed. It's up to the country. And here our expectations are very clear. You get the perspective, you get the candidate status, but we expect you to do these reforms that are detailed out. And the second, or the first question you asked me, well, the whole process shows how important the respect for the international law is. The international law that says very clearly that every country that is sovereign has the right to determine its own future and to decide where to go and what to do. And here it is very clear that the European Union, actually a peace project, is the destination where Ukraine wants to go. And we encourage Ukraine to do the necessary steps. We are impressed by the fight of the Ukrainian people for their independence, for their sovereignty, for the integrity of their territory. They are fighting for freedom, and this is one of the universal rights, the basis of our international law, that we all have to respect.
Thank you. Yes, please. Please present yourself.
Yes, hello. Sorry. Pia Gripenberg, Swedish Daily Dagens.
So let's just do a quick overview of what we've just been hearing here. We've been hearing from EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, who has given her recommendation that Ukraine should be given candidate status to the EU. She said that good work has been done, important work remains to be done. The entire process is merit-based. She really insisted on this point, saying that Ukraine has done a lot of work ahead of this point here, and this is a huge step forward for Ukraine. Of course, this decision, the final decision, does rest with the EU Council, who will be meeting next week and will give their opinion on this and will finalize it or not. They've also discussed similar situation for Moldova, who will also given the recommendation for candidate status. Georgia, however, will have to wait. Stay tuned.
So these are very practical.
You're watching Euronews now. I'm Tukumbo Silako with your top stories. The European Commission has officially backed Ukraine's bid to join the EU, but its candidate status comes with a long list of conditions.